Hi, everybody. You're listening to The Good Life, coming to you from Arrow Radio in the Wairarapa, and we have two people with us today. So I'm Margaret Crawford, and we're kindly sponsored by Joe and Kelly, real estate agents of Carterton, who thank you very much for this. And the series is a series of programs devoted to those who've moved to the country who are thinking of buying a lifestyle block. Now, last time we talked about buying the block. This time, it's more important, is the shelter for the humans we're going to talk about. So, housing of all the different types you can get. And I have two people with us again. Marnie Rutherford. Hello, Marnie.
Hello.
And we have David Hicks. Or are you Dave Hicks?
Either or.
I have a son, no, it's a cousin-in-law who's a Dave Hicks. So it was quite funny seeing your name. So welcome. Now, Dave is with containers. So we're going to learn a lot about how to build with containers. And you run your own business?
Correct.
Good. Great. So, Marnie, you've moved on various properties and things. What has your housing been like?
Well, my housing's all been in a much more traditional vein. I've bought a couple of villas and renovated those.
Yeah.
But I have had contact with other people who've built houses using less traditional methods.
Okay. So when you say renovated, were they already existing houses?
Yeah, they both were. The two that I've done here in Carston were both traditional villas. I did that thing that people do where you buy the worst house on the best street and then sink tons of money into it. Yeah, so I've done that twice now.
And you still haven't learned?
No, I know.
But you know what you want in the end?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I looked at it this way. If you buy a new house or a newer house, then it's difficult to justify spending money on it to make it how you want it. But if it's already a little tired and a little unloved, then changing it to how you want it just makes sense.
But mine is also your creative streak, I'm sure. Your need to hammer and nail and take walls out. Dave, Marnie has had some houses that one would look twice at, I would say, or would I say 3 times, and you've taken walls out and moved bathrooms and kitchens and so on. But now, on a lifestyle block, is that more difficult?
It really depends on what you want and how you want to. I enjoy the process, so that's one of the reasons why I buy these terrible old houses and then develop them on. But for a lot of people, that's not what they want to do.
Right.
Obviously, if you're going to buy something that's a bit newer and a bit flasher, then it's going to cost you a bit more up front. But if you buy something that needs some work, then it's probably going to take you a little while to get it how you want it.
Right. So now, Dave, you came into the Wairarapa. Are you reasonably new, or?
I guess so. 3.5 years.
Oh, you're very new.
Yeah,
very
fresh.
New.
Yeah.
fresh on the block. But why did you look at Wairarapa first of all?
Well, my parents both live here.
Okay, good enough reason.
Yeah. It's quite convenient.
Yeah.
I used to live in Wellington. We grew up in Wellington. So after living overseas for a few years, just to come back and be close to the olds, and Wairarapa was always fairly familiar. And it allowed us to do sort of what we wanted to do.
I think that came out in last month's conversation, that in fact the Wairarapa, particularly Carterton, seems to be more amenable to alternative living and things.
Yeah, from experience, I definitely agree with that.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Definitely.
Now, Marnie, with all your renovations, did you have to work with the council and put in plans and?
Absolutely, yeah. It's absolutely essential. I mean, the days when you could just get out there with a hammer and some nails and go for it are well and truly gone.
But you bought one that was like that.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. The one I've got at the moment, the previous owner had been. Let's just say he was trying, but his DIY wasn't terribly successful in some cases. So I've actually had to spend quite a lot of money undoing some of the stuff that he'd done. But that non-permitted stuff as well, it's all sorts of interesting and terrible things, like invalidating your insurance happens when you don't have permitted changes done on your house. So it really is essential that you work with the council. You also, in a lot of cases, have to get a licensed building practitioner to do some of these jobs. Things have changed a lot since I did my first house. A lot of the things that I did to the first house I could do myself, but in the wake of the leaky homes thing that happened, the rules have changed so much around building now that there's a lot of stuff that a layperson simply can't do.
That's actually very interesting, because we were talking about alternative housing. A lot of people's idea is I can build what I want and I can do what I want, but that's not actually true.
No, it's really not. You have to be within the rules. That no matter what you build, it still has to conform to the building regs, and in some cases it has to be built by a licensed building practitioner. You can elect to do some of the work yourself, but it still has to be signed off. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
and in any case, you're going to need a permit.
Okay. So Dave, when you first came up, was your idea to use containers straight away? Was that or were you forced into this?
Oh, no. No, my idea for containers came years ago when I used to have one as a workshop, because I do woodworks and I needed a workshop. And I invested in an old shipping container and put it in the backyard. And, it just sort of grew on from there. I was always in it every day, and I was thinking, I reckon you could do something with these.
Yeah.
And then it just grew from there to making a house out of 6 of them,
So you made a house out of 6. You were in the paper. I do remember that beautiful-looking house. But now, when Marnie was talking about permits and things, what was the process with you?
No, she's absolutely correct. I had to do the same as any other person would to build a house. As you say, if you want to do something different, you have to put in the time and effort to get it off the ground, and it's far easier to just go with a building company and get a spec home. But you got to want to do something different, so I had to go through all the hoops and plans and adjustments all the way. It took a good 6 months.
Had the council any previous history of building with containers?
No, not in this area, no.
So they had to learn as you had to learn.
They were really flexible. The main point of help was basically my engineer, because you see, when you work with a good engineer, and depending on your build, the engineer has a lot of to sign off as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's where you get into the 2 different categories of what you're actually doing, engineering work versus building work, and the engineer was my biggest help.
So just explain further, when you say engineer, what was he overseeing? What was he looking at?
Well, when you're cutting into containers and dealing with heavy steel and all that, it's not really building work. It comes under engineering and engineering work. So he was for foundations, roof and cutting. Yeah.
Right.
Which was most of the job.
Yes, because you've really got a piece of metal together. I mean, you've got to adapt that, so it has to be cut and molded to what you want.
Windows and stuff.
Yeah, windows and doors.
Yeah. You need windows and doors.
But the engineer thing counts for any building or construction activity. Things like snow loading on roofs, which we don't actually have to worry about a whole hell of a lot here, but we do have to worry about the wind in the Wairarapa.
Yeah.
So things like wind resistance and strength and shear strength and all those other things that engineers think about, structural engineers think about.
And also you'll know as well from after the Christchurch earthquakes, their rules and regulations, they just stack them up another notch, just to cover themselves.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the big things I would imagine is the lie of the land.
Yeah.
So for particularly, I would imagine for a container, it really has to be carefully worked out. How are you going to put it? Where are you going to site it?
Yeah. Foundations, like any house, are one of the most important.
Yeah.
The lie of the land really is very flexible with containers, because they're very solid anyway. But the pinning out of the foundations is one of the, like any house, the most important part.
Right.
However, to get it right, you don't need to do like a lot of things where you see on grand designs where they put concrete pads down and all the rest of it. When you work with containers, you don't need to do any of that. You can actually support them just on the corners and places where the internal walls have been removed.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So they're like on piles.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
My house looks like
I've seen
it's
his
on.
house.
Oh, you've seen his house. Sorry.
Yeah, my house looks like it's on little matchsticks from a distance, but
Yep.
they're great big 10mm thick steel poles,
Okay.
just supporting the corners and the middle sections where the wall's been cut out. Yeah.
Is that better than on a concrete slab?
Better. I wouldn't say better. It's just it's a different method of building.
Right.
Sure, you'll save a heap on concrete.
Yes.
However, then you got to get involved with the engineering and the steel and the welding.
Yes.
So you save a bit, and you spend a bit more.
Yeah.
It's,
That's interesting.
economically, I wouldn't say you're better off. It's just a different method.
A different method.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so are most container houses on piles, or are they on a
No, I've seen
slab?
well, most are overseas. However, I've seen a few here on Grand Designs and other programs where I actually have to think, well, why have they done that? But
Okay.
that's their plan.
I think there's a container house in Wellington. I think is it
Yeah,
Island Bay?
Yeah,
Yes, it's
Farrow Bay, that's
Farrow
stacked
Bay.
up on
That's
3.
it. Yeah, that's right. Right, cut into the side of the
Yeah,
cliff
it's been there
of
years.
the hill. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
Yeah.
been there for years.
been there a long
we lived
time,
opposite,
yeah,
and we
yeah.
could see it.
yeah.
We lived
Yeah,
down
I think
the
I think that just sits on a concrete base, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
He's got about 3 stacked.
That's right.
Yeah, well, you can go
Which is-
8 high. You can go, if you get the foundations right, you can go 8 high. If you
That's
want.
what I was going to ask. Well, I was thinking of, you just mentioned wind in Wairarapa.
Yeah.
I would think a bit carefully about going too high with
No,
a
no.
container.
No. So, no, it's anchored down well overdone strength-wise. However, that's what the engineer wanted, and that's what got me through it. So,
Yeah.
I often say to people, I hope that day never comes. However, if my house got flattened in an earthquake, I think the rest of the Wairarapa would honestly be just
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah. I mean,
Hopefully that doesn't happen.
No,
but
yeah.
yeah.
I don't think there's any kind of building that is totally
No, you're
earthquake
correct.
proof, you know.
And no one knows.
No, you can't. I mean, there are a lot of different ways of putting together the foundations for a house. When I had this house I've got now repiled, that was an interesting exercise and quite expensive.
Yeah.
As you say, Dave, the rules now since Christchurch mean that the foundations in particular are quite massively over-engineered, but for a really good reason. Because
Okay.
it's going to, if it's not, and we have a Christchurch, then it's going to be the first thing to go. So it's about limiting the potential damage. It's about reducing the risk,
Yes.
which is fair enough. I mean, it does make it more expensive to do because there's more materials, there's more labour, there's more time, but
Yeah, it's
ultimately,
for a reason.
you would be glad of it. If
Yeah.
we had a bad shake, you would be glad of it.
Yeah.
So how big is your containers? How many have you got?
6.
6. So we've got 6 rooms, or are they
No,
divided
well,
up?
it's the configuration is like if you look down on it, it would be like a capital I, if you
Okay,
can
so
imagine
two,
that.
2 ends and a middle
So
strip.
it's basically 2, 2, and 2, like a
Okay,
yeah. How big? Roughly 180 squares.
right. And then how many bedrooms have you got?
4.
That's
Gosh,
good. Yes,
that's huge.
I was going to say, that's,
Yeah.
that's not a little house.
Well, no, it's not a little house. I came from a little house. It's not a little house. However, I guess what makes it bigger is the fact that it's about 180 squares, yet that's not including a garage. Most of your spec homes will be about 220
Okay.
with a 30 or 40 square metre garage.
Yes. And they all look the same.
Yeah.
No, I'm just teasing.
I didn't say
You know,
that.
I always remember what in the 60s, little boxes all in a
Wow.
row.
Well, I
and-
call them cookie cutter houses.
Yeah.
Cookie cutter.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
this is the thing about alternative building. You can actually fashion it in a very different way.
Yeah.
And you're not going to find the same one next door to you.
No.
Hopefully not. They're not going to copy you. But now, bathrooms, I was going to just lead on to you. So how did the plumbing work with you cutting holes in the wall and stuff?
So, yeah, well,
I'm sorry, I can see the most
yeah.
important item is...
No,
is-
I had, like you said, some parts you have to deal with the tradespeople to get the final ticks, and that's fair enough. And I had a lot of tradespeople at the start who would just turn around in the driveway and go back out. Just it scared them looking at my place, like it's too different.
Yeah.
In actual reality is it's no different than one of their villas on stilts.
Okay.
You
okay.
go.
They obviously didn't watch
Yeah.
enough of those programs that show
Well,
how
I think-
easy it is.
No, I think, to be honest, I think the tradespeople have got so much work on.
Yes,
that
I know.
Why look at something a little bit difficult when I can do the job down the road?
Yeah, and get quick money out of that.
Exactly,
Rather. Yeah.
and I can understand that. So I was actually fortunate enough to find the good ones
Good for you.
who had an interesting sort of job at the end of it. Yeah,
Yes, and they could probably follow on because you could run a business now.
yeah.
I mean, so you can refer them on to further builds and
To
things like
further
that,
bits
yeah.
and pieces. Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
And
The friends that I had who built the rammed earth house, they had the same sort of thing, because the rammed earth is there isn't another rammed earth house in the area.
No, so it becomes
So it all becomes a bit experimental,
Yeah.
and the builder that they got in, they had two builders in, one to do the rammed earth part and one to do the roofing and the more conventional building, interior walls, etc. But they were the same thing. They're plumbing this and fitting it out, and the electrics, for example. The electrics all go into the rammed earth wall as the wall's being rammed. So once it's in there, you can't move it. And I think that freaked out some of the electricians a little bit.
Yeah.
So do you want to explain what a rammed earth is? Because I mean, a lot of people won't know what you're talking about.
Okay, so rammed earth house is exactly what it says in the tin. You build a form in the shape of the wall that you want, and then you tip in bucketfuls of lime and cement from the top, and you use a hydraulic rammer to compress the mixture, this damp mixture, into a wall. When you pull the formwork off, there's your wall.
So it's not bricklaying. I mean, it's
No.
like totally different.
Sounds
Totally
like hard
different.
work.
It's deeply hard work. It's very, very labour intensive. I did a couple of days with Timo and Erin on this, as they used quite a lot of volunteer labour to help them
Yes.
build. And I did a couple of days there, and I can tell you it's extremely hard work, but
now,
very
when
satisfying.
you say rammed earth, but you're talking about, did you say cement and things like that?
It's cement
So
and
where-
lime.
Cement and lime. So where's the earth?
The lime bit, I think.
Oh, is that
I think if you
I had this vision of, like African huts
yes.
built with mud.
Well, that
it's a
would
similar
be,
thing, isn't it?
Yeah, that would be. But in the commercial sense here, if you're building here, then building with earth in as damp a country as New Zealand
Yeah, I
is,
know, melt away.
it's not going to work. It's not going to work. But this rammed earth idea that they had was from having seen similar buildings in other countries and having looked at the healthy homes, the whole healthy homes thing, as well as the financial side of it.
And is it cheaper?
Not initially, no. When I asked Timo about it, he said it was probably a little bit more expensive, but in the long term, the running costs
Yeah.
are much
So
lower.
good insulation, eh?
Yeah, so extremely good insulation, good thermal mass, very healthy, very the water that's inherent in the atmosphere inside a house dissipates out through the walls very readily, so you end up with a nice, dry, easily heatable home.
That sounds very interesting.
It is.
So what do the walls look like? Are they like come out like whitewash sort of look?
No,
like?
he's just left his just as they come out of the forms. They're 300 millimeters thick,
Oh.
Okay. Yep.
so they're very substantial.
Yep.
Big
But-
windowsills, huh?
But well, actually, I was around there the other day, and he set the windows about halfway in at about 150. So when you're sitting in the house, the walls actually don't look that thick
Oh,
because the windows, which are 100 mil, are actually sitting
went for
about
that
halfway through.
yeah.
So so it's lightened it no end. Otherwise, it'd be all a bit medieval looking, you know.
Yes. And so rammed earth. So now getting back to the sort of construction thing, they have to have a base
Yeah. So that's a concrete
pad.
pad. Yeah.
Then they build a form
Yep.
and pour this mixture in.
Bucketfuls of this stuff in.
Oh,
Yep.
so is it mixed sort of by hand virtually?
Yeah. Well, we actually.
I'm giving this quite detailed because
We-
Dave,
we-
this might be your next job. Go and help someone build a.
We used a rotavator. So when you mix the cement with the lime, and you put water in it to make it moist.
Yes.
So it'll hold together, and of course that activates the cement. So you can only mix this stuff in fairly small batches. So we had this big concrete pad, and we were mixing on this pad using a rotavator, mixing it in small batches.
What is it? What's a rotavator?
It's a thing that you use
like
to turn over the garden.
Yes,
like a
motorised hoe.
motorised hoe
okay,
for the
right.
garden.
Small.
Yeah. So we had one of those, and
You use a concrete mixer or something?
No. They were
bec-
just mixing it. Like a cake mixer.
Yeah.
They were using it like a cake mixer, but in small,
In buckets.
bigger.
yeah,
buckets.
because
In the big plastic buckets.
a cement mixer doesn't do a big enough batch,
Oh, rightio.
and
yeah.
it doesn't do it evenly enough.
Yeah, fair enough.
Because it's not very liquid, it's only damp. It's not actually a liquid form.
Oh, okay. So when
So
you're pouring it,
It looks like sand. It looks all the world like sand.
You got to thump it.
And then you use a
okay.
hydraulic rammer to ram this stuff in. And it's so there's people running backwards and forwards with buckets of this stuff, tipping them in the top, and then there's a guy there with this hydraulic rammer ramming them in. And it was it takes a little while.
I would imagine so.
It's immensely satisfying, and when you see this thing go up, it's just a form, and then you pull the form off, and there's this huge wall.
And are the windows built into the wall?
No, the windows are put in later, so the
They cut
walls
them
are
out,
built.
Okay.
The walls are built, and then they put a ring beam all around the top to connect all the walls together, and then they put the windows into the spaces where the walls aren't. So you build your walls with your spaces for doors and windows already there.
That's what I mean. So as they're building, there will be a form for a window and a form for a door.
That's
Okay,
right.
yes, okay.
Yeah.
Gosh, I'm learning. I love this program. I learned so much. I can see my empty paddock. Listen, husband, we're now going to have an earth-rammed house there, plus a container.
I thought building with containers was hard work, but far out.
Yeah, and this obviously you do need groups of volunteers and friends. But it's a bit like barn raising, the old-fashioned where they used to get a whole group together and build one building together, and then the next one you move on and you build the next guy's barn and so on. We don't. Do we have that? Well, we have that through volunteers, I would imagine.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, they Timo and Erin, when they decided to build this, they got in touch with UCOL.
Right,
the local college, because they run a building course.
Yes.
So they got a couple of guys to come down to get sort of a week's worth of experience in this rammed earth building technique. It gives them experience of being on a building site.
Yes.
And it also gives them some experience in an alternative building technique.
Yes.
Yeah. I think they had a few guys down there.
Yes, I had a friend who was building it down in Hamner, and she was organic, and she went to the local polytechnic and got the students who were doing something to come and lay out the whole orchard and do all that. And I thought, that's interesting, labour. Do you think you can get some as well, Dave? Any of the welders, the students to come and practice?
Yeah, possibly it's something I could look into. However, I think my son is the next one on board.
Training, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got to always look for the next lot who are trained enough to do this. Yes.
Yeah. I think he'll be good on the welder. Yeah.
Yes, okay. All these interesting things. But getting back to this, so now I'm just thinking, conceptualizing this rammed earth. So it's not. I had envisioned that it was like a mud. I don't know why. I think it's because there was on one of those grand designs somebody who built it with mud, and they had to, lay it on and lay it on. It was out of clay, basically.
Yeah.
And I know
that's cob.
Is that what they call cob?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we lived in a farmhouse in South Africa that was built in probably 17th, 18th century, which was boulders put together with mud and straw, and then lime washed over that. So the walls actually were also very thick, and the windows were very deep. But you couldn't put anything. You couldn't hang a shelf on the wall or anything, because it would probably, you'd hit a stone. But it was, quite sensitive that. But they were lime washed every year, so that it held it together. And that was through winter and summer and everything, usually with a thatch roof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now they do them from hemp as well, huh?
Yes, I again, I'm a big fan of Grand Designs. I love that program.
I saw this on Facebook.
and they had one on there.
No, someone Dutch place has done one fully out of hemp.
Okay. Yeah, there was one that was. I think it's hemp as a powder. It's a similar sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's as a powder. They put some water in with it and then put a form up and ram it in.
Yeah.
And then it binds together because of the cellulose in the plant or something.
Well, there's a man who lives in Carterton, he's British and he's now retired, but he was a bricklayer, and of course in New Zealand we don't build very much with bricks. So when he came out here, he did a lot of buildings in Wellington. That was sort of 60s or so. And then he worked with the polytechnics teaching bricklaying. And he said, probably every bricklayer there is in New Zealand has gone through him because there aren't that many.
No.
Yeah.
Bricklaying is way out. It's not a thing people do anymore. They build with all sorts of things. I'm going to suggest we take a little break and then we can come back and talk about straw bale and all these other kinds of alternative housing. So let's hope this one's going to work, because I'm always a little bit different when things start going. Okay, and it's called Home by Sinead. Home again. So we'll see how we go. Okay. Is it gone on? Why has it not gone on?
Butcher clock
right, welcome back. I've been away for a month and I find doing all this stuff again kind of confusing. But never mind, we're back again. And we were talking about rammed earth and container houses. But one of the things while we were off air, we were talking about you do need a builder. And you said that, Marnie, that there was a builder involved in the rammed earth.
Yeah, there were two builders here. Because the rammed earth walls are structural, they need to be signed off and approved in an engineering context, and they were done by a builder from Auckland, a guy called Paul, who came down with a team of people to do that job. But
was he experienced in it?
Oh, very much so.
Okay.
Yeah, he's done this quite a few times. But the rest of the building was done by a local builder, so putting the roof on, putting the internal walls in, fitting the kitchen, all of those things were all done by a local builder.
Okay, and the UCOL?
UCOL sent some volunteers to work alongside the builders. Really, this was just to give the UCOL guys and girls some experience on a building site.
You see, what I'm thinking too is both of you are doing alternative type housing, but you actually are building a skill base in the community of people who understand the different type of building. Am I jumping too fast?
No, that's absolutely it. And the good thing about building, particularly in the Carston district, is that Carston District Council are really up for this. They are open to this stuff. Not all councils are.
No.
There are some councils around the country who would absolutely not want to do this.
Some are just black and white.
Yeah, they
Okay.
really are. But Carston actually is really, they're very good, they're very flexible, and they will look at pretty much anything. They want you to follow the rules, don't get me wrong.
Yes.
But they'll pretty much... They're up for most things, I think.
Yes. No. I mean, I have great confidence that we've had dealings with the local council, but it needs an open head and an open mind
Totally.
to be able to see your vision and to make it work.
Yep.
So, yeah. So you also were saying that a lot of the work you did was more engineering in the sense of the cutting and so on.
Yeah.
But I was interested what you mentioned when we were off air was that the wood, was that for the roof, was on the outside?
Well, the roof was structural building work
Okay.
for my house.
Yes.
However, that was all consented and signed off through my engineer. Because
Okay.
again, it was a regular roof.
Right. So now what is the roof made out of?
Oh, the roof is wood.
Oh, it's wood. Okay.
Yeah.
So it isn't, you see, sometimes people think of a container house as this little box, but you've adapted the box.
For the house,
You've thought
yeah.
outside the box.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
Oh dear.
Well-
Bet you've heard that a few times.
Yeah. Well, the house, the main house needed a roof. Number one was it helps with the insulation. It provides eaves for the overhang of the containers.
Of course, yeah.
Aesthetics, it makes the house look complete. And the number one reason, though, is to collect rainwater.
Because we didn't mention that, but you're off grid.
Yes.
So you use your own water.
Own water, own power,
What have you got? Solar
power, yeah.
power, and wireless telephone, etc., etc.
Yeah, wireless internet, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You see, this is what's becoming easier these days.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that wireless, you can use that for all your
Yeah.
communication stuff. But one of the houses we haven't mentioned is the good old straw bale. Now, I tried very hard to get someone on to come with us, but they were working, just as you found with your rammed earth couple. There are a number of straw bale. I didn't realise how many there are in the Wairarapa. And there is a builder down in Featherston who is Dave Finley Building, and he's done a couple of houses, or he's overseen a couple of houses. Again, it's the people do a lot of their own work, but again, it has to be signed off and to regulations. Have any of you ever been in a straw bale house?
Yeah, I have in the UK, not here.
Okay.
There's a friend of a friend of a friend built a straw bale house a number of years ago, and it was a nice house. They've got a real nice feel to them, straw bale houses.
Yes.
They really do, but they are. You kind of need to build them a little bigger than you would other
Yes, because the
otherwise
walls are
do, because
very
the
big.
walls are so incredibly thick.
Yes.
The walls are 450 mil thick. For the most
Which is
part.
bigger than your rammed earth.
Yeah,
one.
it is. Yeah, they're huge. The insulating properties are very good. I think the thing that gave me pause for the straw bale was that, well, doesn't it get all full of insects? But apparently you spray them with something to stop the insects coming in.
That's right. And one of the things too is the type of straw you use. You don't use hay, apparently.
No, you don't.
You don't use hay. And what is the reason?
Because
it's got seed.
Yeah, the hay's got seed in it, but also it's not coarse enough.
Yes,
it's not robust
enough.
enough.
Look the same to me. So.
Yeah, I know. These are things I've learned as we go along. But we had friends who built down in Twizel, and it was the most gorgeous setting because he had a little river running past with trout in it, and all this sort of stuff. I don't think he ever finished it because he moved off. But the walls were incredibly thick.
Yeah.
But it's warm in winter, so your insulation is sort of really high up there.
Yeah.
And in summer it's cool. So it's got deep windows, and it's the same in a way. It's not all that much different from. No, it is different from rammed earth because the straws put in, what you call it,
in bales.
Molds. Yes, and you've got the wooden framework, and you stack the straw in, and then they still have to put a layer of either some sort of plaster over, and then there's apparently quite different types. So if you need to talk to someone, please talk to. There's another person called Ed Crawford up north somewhere who is an expert on straw bale houses. But as I say, Dave was very helpful talking about it. I mean, he got really. I wanted him to come on because he obviously has built it. He knew what he was talking about and knew the pros and cons. The one house he built, I think, in Gladstone, I said, where did you get the straw from? He said, it was within 5 kilometres of the house, which I thought that's another thing. It's using what is around.
Yep.
Yeah. So that, again, that's another form of house. But with all those houses, what are the internal walls? Do they just have stud walls, or do they... I don't think
they plaster over them.
It depends. It depends. Because the walls are structural, so if it's a reasonable size house, to get across a decent span of the house, you'd have to have some internal structural walls. But the ones that I've been in, the internal walls have just been stud walls.
Yes, I thought so, because I can't remember. I know we went through, but I don't remember the inner walls being that thick. It's actually the outer walls that are the straw. And then it's inside is done with wood and panelling and things like that.
Yeah.
And then the roof is a conventional roof, again.
Yep.
But also built on a concrete slab, if I remember rightly. I can't imagine you building a straw bale house on a wooden platform. I huff and I puff and I'll blow your house down. I mean, all these different systems and things, you keep thinking we're so conventional in our thinking in a lot of ways. We don't imagine all these other things.
I reckon if you're going to plan something different, just go for a trip overseas to Europe Europe, and just have a look at what they're doing there first, because everything here is about 10 years behind.
Yes.
Yeah, traditionally buildings were always built from whatever was close to hand. So you were talking before about the straw being from 5k's down the road. Well, that's why in Europe there are so many different ways of building a house, because you built with what was here, So if it was stone, you built your house out of stone. If you had lots of straw, you built your house out of straw.
Or if you had, like in South Africa, you had round stones and mud, it was
then you built it out of round stones and mud. So
for me, I had lots of containers.
and we were very modern now. We've got all those containers floating around, literally floating around.
Yeah, there's they say at any one time there's about 30 million surplus in the ports around the world.
Really?
At any one time.
So you talked earlier about, we mentioned the person in Featherston who's trying to get a community up of small houses. So, Dave, you're going to do one with containers?
My long-term goal would be to work in with something very similar to that guy. I've yet to meet him yet. I think it's a great idea. Just so long as people don't put it in their head as like a trailer park, like what they have in the States, which is all messy and very poor people. Yeah, it doesn't have to be that way. No, at all. It can be a lot more refined and help people out.
Yeah, I think his vision for the community he's trying to develop down in Featherstone is to have a set of tiny houses. His target market is really people who have been completely shut out of the conventional housing market.
Yeah.
So tiny houses to give them some living accommodation, but then there's a lot of communal facilities on there as well. Which is, so he's not just providing houses for people, he's building a community for people.
Yeah, I think there was a wonderful program on. It was also Grand Designs, and he went back to it afterwards. But there were a whole row of wooden houses, and in the ends they had a garden. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, it's called the Hedgehog Collective.
Oh, what a lovely name!
Done in, I think it's in Brighton in the UK, and those were built to own. So
and they helped each other build them.
Yeah,
yes.
So they did the same thing. There's a whole row. They're standalone houses.
Yeah.
But they contracted to provide what's called sweat equity. So they put in their labour to build the house, overseen by a builder. And the great thing about it is the people who built the houses, 15, 20 years later,
still there.
The same people still live in those houses.
Yeah.
They built a community when they built the houses.
Yes, because they all helped each other.
Yeah, yeah.
So there we are.
And probably most of them at the time would have not been able to get a bank loan or do it the conventional
that was the
way.
whole thing.
Absolutely, that was the whole thing of it. They had some of these guys were ex-travellers. They had no credit history. They hadn't got a hope of getting a mortgage. And being down in the south of the UK, of course, houses are extremely expensive down there. So the chances of being able to afford somewhere for themselves and their children to live was very slim. But given this route and this idea of sweat equity, they were able to contribute enough to be able to start doing this rent to own thing. Got a big chunk of the contribution that they made themselves using their own labour, and then they're all still there, or most of them are still there.
I know it was such an inspiring one, and the gardens had all grown by then. But looking here in the Wairarapa, we didn't actually get out of our estate agent how much land costs, but land isn't that cheap anymore. Even here in the Wairarapa, when you go out and want to buy a couple of acres and things, you bought a clear section when you bought it?
Yeah. Lucky enough to get in when it was still pretty reasonable, I think.
Okay,
now I think for this similar size, I know some people who bought a very similar size to ours for a little bit more, and that was an Ekatahuna.
Okay,
so it's just shifting further and further
out. Yes, you end up going miles and miles.
So and there's nothing wrong with Ekatahuna.
No, I
like Ekatahuna.
I was always amazed that if you go in the back roads, they're lovely little areas.
Yeah,
absolutely lovely. Just a bit far from if you're wanting to be near a town.
Fun fact: Ekatahuna hosted the National Lawnmower Racing Championships a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I passed by it. Yeah.
Not the gumboot throwing or something like that, but
lawnmower racing.
What's the one they have, the sheep races? There's one, I think it's in Martin or one of those towns in the Manawatu, and they have sheep racing. And my sister visited from South Africa last year, and we picked up this sort of fold of things, and she said, "Really, they have sheep racing?" Anyway, but yes, so getting back to it, so when one wants to start building an alternative building, and we didn't even mention there's someone in the Wairarapa who lives in a ute. In fact, I think there's a couple.
Yeah, there's a couple
in Martinborough.
And there's one up in the back of Carston too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in one?
Yeah, not in New Zealand.
Oh, how big are they?
They vary in size, but they're actually quite big. There used to be one down near Ocean Beach. There was a lady built one down near Ocean Beach there, and it was lovely actually.
It's like a one room. It's open plan.
Yeah, it is.
By curved furniture.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. But you've got to have very square furniture for a. I see a rammed earth one or a straw bale. They can kind of get a bit of a curve in.
Yeah,
I don't think you can in your containers.
No.
Well, you can go with the dings on them.
Oh yes, sort of. I know. But yes, so when someone wants to build this alternative, I think we have to encourage them that yes, people like Carterton District Council are open to it, but you do have to have a builder behind you, unless you are a builder yourself. And like you, Dave, you ended up with a good engineer, who was able to help.
Yeah.
And skill.
Yeah. Yeah. No matter what you do, you have to go down the rule books, which is fine. It's normal.
Yeah.
It's just, of course, you got to realise that if you want it, the more different you want to be, the more obstacles you're going to overcome. You have to overcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
And potentially more expensive as well.
Oh, sure.
You know, if you're going to build your as you said before, your cookie cutter home, the costs of that are very well known.
Yeah.
Traditional building, a builder can give you a price for that, and he'll be within cooey of it every time.
And they've done a costing on the materials.
Yeah.
And,
but when you get out there out onto the new frontier of building, if you will, then those costs aren't so well known. They're not so easy to quantify.
No, lots of people look at my house, they say, oh yeah, containers, they're cheap to build with,
Yes, I know. And I remember that statement, I think it was in your one article, that it wasn't that cheap.
Well, it depends what you call cheap, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, what I mean, to a conventional home of the same size.
I could have done a conventional home half the time for probably a lot less.
Mm-hmm.
The thing was, I didn't want to do that. And that's what it comes down to. If you want to do something different, you pay the extra and you spend the extra time to get the result.
Yes. You step out.
It's not about the money. I mean, the money's important, but the decision to do probably your construction and my construction was not a money factor.
Yes, no, I agree there. I think that these are dreams.
Yeah.
I know in our previous programs we've talked about why people go on to small holdings or lifestyle blocks. Yeah. And it's a dream often. It's, living the dream. It's an idea that they want to follow through. And it has its challenges, as we know. Yeah. But there's a reward in that you've done it or that you've attempted it. Which you probably wouldn't do in a conventional house. A conventional house is so pre-designed. It's got the good kitchen and the nice bathroom and ensuite, and you have that too, don't you, now?
I have a lovely bathroom now, thank you very much.
Actually, you do, but you did sort of remove the other one completely.
Yeah, I had when I was in the depths of the renovating last year, I had no bathroom for 8 months. And for about 3 weeks I had no running water at all. It was it's just the way that it goes, But no, all better now. Lovely bathroom, etc. But that's renovating. That's just the way that it is.
Yes.
Honestly, I could have just bought a house that was already perfect. Yeah. But like I said before, I enjoy it. Well, where is the fun in that, actually? Yes, where is the fun in that? And I enjoy the process, and I like the idea of being able to create something that fits the way that I live.
Yes.
And that's what I've done.
That's right. And I'm not sure if you can do that in an urban area. Although we mentioned the chap down in Uhuru Bay who built the container he worked at a polytechnic, if I remember rightly, and he built it. That's a 3-story. But there's another friend, I can't remember, Scoble or something. He's the one who's built around the coastline. He built himself a lighthouse, which is actually was a studio for his wife, and then he built a stone keep. Oh, yeah. If you drive around the coast, they're these strange. He lets them out as B&Bs, but he's always building odd things.
Yeah. There are strange buildings all over New Zealand. People have built castles, and not just the one down in Dunedin either. People have built with straw bales. They've built with concrete. Slab concrete. They've built with all sorts of things. There are some, and you just need to look around Wellington, on the cliffs in Wellington. There's some strange houses up there.
But those probably did go through the regulations. But it's in the outbacks. I mean, we drove the other day. I won't even mention where it was. And
there are also old regulations as well.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah. I think, wasn't it your place? There was only one building that was passed, and that was way back in the 60s or something.
And the entirety of my property had one permit on it, and that was for the dairy shed, for the vat room on the dairy shed out the back, and that was from 1965. Yeah. Nothing else has a permit on it, not a thing.
Well, this is the thing of if you're going to buy an old place, especially on a section somewhere, you know. But we drove past this and these sort of, I would call them alternative living I've got to be careful how I describe. I think there was a bit of weed growing around.
Yeah.
Anyway, a lot of them they were like clapboard, and they were sort of kind of falling apart, and then there would be a trailer with a lot of broken, fridges and
and that's exactly the scene you don't
want.
You don't want to create,
No.
and that's I think that's the issue with tiny home. Like the guy in Featherston was trying to create.
Yes.
His vision and a lot of others is probably very nice and clean. However, the perception just comes into it with just what you said.
Yes.
Smoking dope and rubbish all around, cars on bricks and all that.
Yeah.
Just like you see in some of the movies in the States. Yeah.
Yes. Well,
And-
there are parts of New Zealand that are like that.
Well, there are. Yeah.
I once did a woofing thing, which is willing works on organic farms,
Yeah.
many years ago when I first came out to New Zealand. And somewhere on the West Coast, it was quite an experience. I applied and they said, yes, come. And the house was built in like the 1970s, all bits of, claimed wood, bits of like a stained glass window, and beautiful bits. It had run down quite a lot. And it was in this sort of foresty area. And he did grow a lot of weed, I have to say, because he made his living. He made his living out of selling cookies at the Nelson Market or something like that. It was really bizarre, but the house was obviously, which when people are building, they often use. Stuff from old houses.
Yeah, I have. A lot of the stuff I've used, clearly to stay within the rules, things like weatherboard, you'd want to buy that new, but I've used reclaimed windows, reclaimed doors, wherever I can. I'm constantly on Trade Me. And neighbourly, buying stuff, and I've found some lovely stuff.
And you found some rubbish too.
But I've found some rubbish too, and it takes time. If you're building from new and you're just nipping down to the local builders merchants and buying it all new, you're there, you're done. If you are trying to reuse windows, doors, etc.,
you'll put in the extra time.
You have to put in extra. You're going to save some money, but you're going to have to put in the time.
And you have to also redesign. So the door isn't going to be the exact sort of standard size. It might be slightly bigger or
So
stranger.
You've got a choice there. You can either wait and find something that's the right size, or you can design your building to accommodate the materials that you have, which is pretty much where I went.
Yeah. Now, what we haven't mentioned is we've talked about the actual living accommodation, but both of you you mentioned you had a workshop in a container. You can use alternative building for your art buildings as well. Containers are quite popular, aren't they?
Well, yeah, that's what my business is growing around now, is the singular. I do singular container conversions. So they're not houses, they're not put together, they're singular boxes. Sleep outs, studios.
Do they have to meet the same kind of regulations?
Well, and good question. That's yes and no. Okay. That's some of the points I'm working with councils at the moment.
Yes.
Basically, yes, if it's going to be lived in. However, there are certain avenues where it can be classed as something different. But I'm still covering those myself.
Right. So,
but in terms of workshops or stuff like that, they're very. You have a look around on your way home wherever you go.
I know they're all over the place.
Yeah.
If you had a flyover, you'd probably pick them up all over the place. Yeah. We're coming towards the end. Marnie, is there anything else you want to say about alternative building? And I wouldn't say warnings, but both of you mentioned the joy of doing it yourself and choosing what you wanted.
Yeah. I think the joy of doing it yourself is that you get exactly what you want. And you end up with something that suits the way that you live and the way that you want to live in the building. As I said several times now, I really enjoy the process, and I like the whole hunting round Trade Me for second-hand stuff, because I just am.
But her yard isn't full of strange objects, I can tell you. She does use it.
It's all stashed in the shed.
The one that has the...
It's very satisfying to do something like this.
Yeah.
But it does take time and it does take money.
Yeah.
And the last word from you, Dave. Your big smile there.
Yeah. I totally agree. I don't enjoy searching Trade Me as much, to be honest.
But you'd enjoy the process of the building.
Yeah, definitely. To like as soon as I bought my block of land, there was 3.5 years ago, I had a picture, I think in pictures, and I drew that picture and I put it on my notice board, and it sat there for 3 years, and now if I look at that picture, that's what I got.
There you are, living the
yeah.
dream.
Yep.
Thank you, both of you. Now, we'll be on, actually, this program, I think, is on Good Fridays, but we will have to pre-record the next time it's on air. So I want to thank both of you for coming along. I really enjoyed, I hope everyone else did, learned something. And good luck with all the building. And Carterton District Council, here we come. On the wave. All right, thanks very much.
Cheers,
Okay.
Margie.
Bye.
Bye.